My name is John Sylvester. I'm Australia's longest serving crime reporter and write a weekly column for The Age. Many of my colleagues have wondered why I've never bothered to move to other areas of the paper. The reason's pretty simple. I've got the best job in journalism, playing cops and robbers and getting paid for it. Over more than 40 years I've covered some of Australia's biggest crimes and met fascinating characters on both sides of the law. In this series, you'll hear from them, the cops and the crooks, telling their stories. Welcome to my world. Welcome to Naked City. The Melbourne suburb of Moonee Ponds may have become famous through Barry Humphrey's alter ego, Dame Edna Everage, but the area was also the home turf of the ruthless Moran crime clan. Lewis Moran was the head, a slaughterman turned SP bookmaker, pickpocket, standover man, common thief and drug dealer. He loved money and would use any means to get it.
Lewis was blind in one eye and had a dollar sign in the other eye. That was Lewis's god, money.
There are crooks that can be funny, generous, soft, warm-hearted. Lewis was none of those. He was mean, nasty, tight with money and a bash artist. Bertie Wrout was a member of the clan, but because he wasn't a blood relative, he was never a member of the board. This gave him a unique position to observe all the Morans from close range without ever falling under their spell.
I can remember to my dying day, I said, "Lewis, you bastard, you've got us killed for a cheap beer."
He was like a roadie for a rock and roll band. He didn't venture onto the centre stage, but he had access to all the backstage secrets. Wrout was smart, with a keen eye for detail. A few years ago we sat down for an interview with documentary maker Terry Carline for his program Dead Famous.
I've seen him fucking, I've had blood spattered on our shoes and say, "Come on, Lewis, let's go."
Bertie was different. He came from a near-legit background, worked in the book trade, but he had a weakness for the seedy side and was an old-school pub drinker. He started off as a drinking buddy to Lewis, then joined the team as a gopher and Lewis as driver.
Where'd you meet Lewis?
Probably at the sale yards from memory, and that's going back a long time ago. I say probably at the sale yards, probably at the pub, the Pastoral, which was the main hotel for the sale yards, and Lewis I think was down the sale yards, Newmarket sale yards, when he was about 14, 15. He was pretty good at the same time. I think he was on the wharf too, working in a gang. But we weren't close. I think later on we became closer. We ended up drinking regularly in the same hotel. We'd see each other every pancake day, but no close friendship. He ran in different circles than I did. And I was doing whatever I was doing at the time.
In the end, Wrout detested Lewis, but as he'd burned all his legitimate bridges, he chose to drink with a gangster rather than drink alone. It would nearly cost him his life.
He was keen on a quid?
Lewis keen on a quid. As one copper described Lewis to me one day, Lewis was blind in one eye and had a dollar sign in the other eye. That was Lewis's god, money. His absolute one and only god. He was ruthless. If you got in the way of Lewis and money, you were in trouble. But other times, for argument's sake, me, Lewis, give us 5,000. Give us 10,000. But he always knew he'd get it back. With some people, he could, he'd lend money, because I think later on, probably when you really work it out, money lending, etc., at exorbitant rates, that was all a way of making money. So that's not generosity, though. That's business. And actually, his getting back, his god was money. And like most that ended up like Lewis, they never got to enjoy it.
Lewis had two sons, a stepson, Mark, and his own natural son, Jason, and they both went into the family business, which was crime. When the boys went into the drug trade, they struck gold, and Lewis was right there behind them. For wherever there was money to be made, Lewis wouldn't be far away.
The money was unbelievable. What sort of money was Lewis making?
Lewis, you'd never know what sort of money Lewis was making, because he kept so many things to himself. He kept so many things going on the side, etc., etc. For myself, the amount of money that I saw in the circles, the boys, Lewis, etc., the lifestyle, it was gigantic. I can remember counting around kitchen tables, this into this pile, this into this pile, etc. Lots of money. And you've got to remember, when ecstasy first came on the scene, they were imports. And they're certainly a lot dearer than what they are today. So it was the big new thing, and the prices were so much higher. The market was there. It was a ready-made market, Australia. And I'm not just talking about Victoria and Lewis's gang, so to speak. I'm talking about it everywhere. And the money that I saw, the money that I handled, the lifestyle that was on around me all the time, it was big. It was big. But it's hard to put figures on something like that, John. You've got to remember, some of these blokes would probably have 3 Sheilas on the go.
Eventually he dabbled into their drug dealing, getting pinched when he wandered into the Moran home just as it was being raided by detectives. A good player out of luck. In January 1998, friend of the family Alphonse John Gangatano was shot dead in his Templestowe home by either Jason or Mark Moran.
Alphonse, he wasn't a bad bloke in the early days, but Alphonse had one failing. He was ratty. Completely and utterly ratty. And mix him, make a cocktail of him and Jason, him and his cronies, they all fed off each other. As to the man himself, he wasn't a bad bloke. But as I say, he was ratty and more so unpredictable.
Did he love the image of being a gangster?
He loved it. He loved it. And I think that's been well documented, apropos, bail justices, etc., etc., people making way for him while he was walking down the street. All this sort of thing. The image, John, the image was everything. And being from where he wasn't the ordinary Italian, there was the Sicilian, the Calabrian, and the image was everything. And this, he fed on this. He fed on this, and as I said, with his cronies and Jason, they fed off each other.
What was the falling out with Jason?
Not so much a falling out as people have made that there was a falling out. There's been various things reported. Really, in retrospect, there wasn't a falling out. There was plenty of arguments about the trials that they were going through. As to an actual falling out, not on. They had their arguments, but they were both the same type. And as to people, it's been written about, it's been done to death 1,000 times. Jason shot Alphonse. All I can say is one word, John: bullshit. End of story for today.
On October 13, 1999, Lewis Moran's son Jason shot drug dealer Carl Williams in the guts over a drug debt and a dispute over the ownership of a pill press. Here's how it was portrayed on the TV show Underbelly.
80 grand by next week. Take Roberta and piss off.
You just shot him, you idiot.
So what, it's a fucking Derringer, he'll live?
It's a bullet wound. He's got to go to the hospital now. The cops will want to know what happened and you're out on bail. Just kill him. It's easier. Kill him.
Nah, I'm 80 grand. If I kill him, I'm never going to see it.
Jesus
Christ,
Christ,
Jason,
Jason,
what are you doing?
Jason shot Carl Williams in the stomach.
That's right.
And did anyone ever think if he'd actually finished the job, this war wouldn't have happened?
No, because at the time that was over money, and installed in those kids by their father was the money angle. And as Jason, I think, said to Mark, well, I wasn't there, but as it's been portrayed, we won't get our money if he's dead. But no, Carl was, as I said, was the fat boy that no one thought was going to be the threat that he was. And again, by the time it got to Lewis and I, we said, bugger the fat thing. We're not frightened of him. And that led to our demise.
Williams, believing the Morans would eventually finish the job, decided to get in first. In June 2000, Jason's half-brother Mark was shot dead outside his Aberfeldy home. Mark was a thinker. He could be generous, but he was also battling his own demons.
Mark was the best of the lot. I love Mark. And Mark would support every bloody stiff down the street. They'd follow him. He'd have, when he was younger, they'd have kids, gangs of kids following him. And Mark was a very, very deep thinker, a calculator, entirely different to Jason. Mark was a lot harder than Jason, a lot harder. Jason was a pussy compared to Mark, an absolute pussy.
In what way do you mean? I mean, was that in bravery or?
In every aspect.
So Mark was more ruthless?
Mark was the ruthless one, yes. And again, it stemmed from Lewis, but he was kind. He had his inner demons. Mark was plagued by demons, whereas Jason, he wouldn't know what a bloody demon was. He was just out and out, and you've done the wrong thing, you get bashed, or whatever the case may be. Mark was a thinker. Mark was, the way to put it, I suppose, Mark was calculating. And again, both of them pushed by the old man, made what they were through Lewis.
The Morans held a council of war and drew up a list of people who might have killed Mark. Carl was on the list, but he wasn't the number one suspect.
After Mark was bowled over, there was a meeting, and was Carl Williams considered a prime suspect?
He was one of about three. I was baffled as to why no one around the table could put their finger on someone. I was completely flabbergasted. And it wasn't for a while that I think they put Carl down, or Carl's associates, And as word filtered back here, there and everything, as it always does in the underworld. And by the time they'd settled on Carl, I sort of was saying, what the bloody hell's going on here? Why couldn't you have settled on him in the first place? What was the bewilderment? And I don't think any of us expected it of Carl, because he was just, as he's been portrayed, the fat boy that was a hanger-oner, was doing his best to learn the trade that he eventually majored in. But as to initial suspect, no.
Next to go was Jason. He was shot dead on Williams' orders while watching the Auskick at Essendon North in June 2003. One of Jason's friends, Pasquale Barbaro, was also shot dead, but he was just seen as collateral damage. Jason could be funny, but when he flipped, he was vicious. Once at a pub, when someone corrected him on the name of a singer of a popular tune, he followed the bloke into the toilet, stuck a gun against his head and said he'd kill him if he ever corrected him again. Clearly he would have been a nightmare at a trivia night.
The boys, Jason. What was Jason like?
Not like he was portrayed in Underbelly. Jason was a lunatic at times. He was a lunatic at times, but he also had a bloody soft side. He could fly into uncontrollable rages. And I don't think, I know from observation that a lot of this stems from Lewis and the upbringing that Jason and Mark got from Lewis. This ruthlessness, this win at all costs, this make money at all costs. And as I said, he wasn't accurately portrayed in Underbelly, the television series. But he had a soft side. He had a bloody soft side too. I had to live with Jason after Mark was killed. The soft side of Jason, I can remember him crying on my shoulder at least 4 or 5 times. Bertie, I've killed Mark. And this went on for some years. He'd get into the drink or get into something and it'd all come back to him. Bertie, I've killed him. I killed him. And I used to have to placate him and talk to him.
Clearly, Jason felt responsible for his brother's death. His lawyer, Andrew Fraser, said when Jason spotted me from the solicitor's office window, he declared he was going to bite my nose off. He must have calmed down by the time he got out of the lift to front me, as the last time I checked my nasal passage remains intact. At the funeral of gangster Victor Pearce, he spotted me, stormed over and just clipped me with his shoulder as he passed. It was a message of sorts, but his enemies were about to deliver a fatal one for him. After Jason's murder, Lewis decided to strike back and offered a contract to kill Carl, but he was too tight to pay the market rate of between $150,000 and $200,000. Instead, he offered $40,000.
If he'd offered $200,000, well, he wouldn't have got killed and I wouldn't have got shot probably. It's meanness again has brought us down.
So he offered $40,000?
$40,000. I don't know where this $50,000 figure come from. And I can remember having a vehement argument with him where he held his head in shame. And it took a lot to get over the top of Lewis because he was a fucking bully.
So this is when he offered $40,000
to the so-called informer and to arrange the contract. And as I said, when I became aware of it, I castigated Lewis. I said, that's bloody ridiculous. Ridiculous figure. And again, his greed his greed and his unwillingness to spend money, that's got him killed and got me in the position where I am now. Yes. A lot of that I wasn't privy to. I didn't really want to know, but I certainly let my thoughts be known on the amount of money.
It was Lewis's legendary meanness that would cost him his life. If he'd paid the top dollar and had Carl killed, then Williams wouldn't have been able to send a hitman after him at the Brunswick Club to finish off the patriarch of the Moran clan. Williams organised the hit team, but one of the killers would later tell police the drug dealer Tony Mockbell was the banker, shortchanging them of 10 grand.
The man with the ill-gotten millions shortchanged the hitmen, allegedly giving them $140,000 instead of the agreed $150,000.
If you like this podcast, subscribe and rate it. Very highly, obviously. Tell your friends. They'll love you for it. On July 22, 2003, after 9 months on remand over serious drug charges, Lewis was granted bail despite police opposition. Officially on the grounds he would seek retribution for his son's murder and posed a threat to a police informer. He was released on condition he reported daily to police, obeyed a night curfew and would not contact witnesses. His lawyers also argued he should be free so he could act as a father figure for his murdered son's children. Perhaps they should have thought about that before they became drug dealers and killers. Hardly the best role model. When he was bailed and was about to leave prison, his former lawyer and good friend Andrew Fraser was there, not in a professional capacity, but as an inmate, having been sentenced over his own drug activities. Fraser called out a friendly farewell, saying, "I'll see you later." Moran sadly shook his head and said, "No, you won't." The lifelong punter knew his cards had been marked. Although Lewis Moran knew he was on a hit list, he was either too stubborn or too fatalistic to do much about it. Police tried to protect Lewis, but he'd lost the will to live. The former light-fingered thief could no longer make his fingers work, and his arthritis meant carrying a gun was now as much a liability as an asset. Lewis was on bail and had a curfew. Detective Senior Sergeant Phil Swindells successfully applied to have the conditions altered, saying the routine would make it easy for the killers to track him. And yet Lewis went to the Brunswick Club every night at the same time because the barmaid there gave him cheap beer. He would stand at the same spot at the bar, making him a sitting duck.
The Brunswick Club, why did you and Lewis drink there?
We drank there mainly, John, because of convenience, and Lewis liked his beer cheap. And we didn't have really many other places to drink because no one really wanted us.
Now, the police had actually varied Lewis's bail so that he wasn't coming home at the same time and making it predictable, but then he turned up at the pub like clockwork. What was that about?
They varied both of our bail. When we got out of jail, Lewis and I weren't talking, and he'd drink at one side of the venue that we drank at, I drank at the other side. Both of us turned up like clockwork because I suppose we didn't really care. We thought we were old-time gangsters and took no notice of the up-and-comers, so to speak, whereas we should have learnt. We got death threats every week wherever we were drinking. It was usually Carl on the phone screaming and shouting, and we just didn't take any notice. And well, I stuck with Lewis, and if Lewis said we'll do this, that was the end of it, and we did it.
Did Lewis think that he was in danger?
We both knew we were in danger. We both knew that, and especially with our onerous bail conditions.
In December 2003, Lewis's good friend Graham the Munster Kinneborough was shot dead outside his Kew home on the orders of Williams.
Notice a change in Lewis once Graham Kinneborough was killed?
Yes, Lewis didn't care then, for a variety of reasons probably. His best mate, his business partner, associate, and he really had no one left. The boys were gone, Graham was gone, and all he really wanted to do was just let the world go by, I think, and he could never wander off into the sunset or anything like that. But things took their course and we got shot. So
when Graham went, he was the money man. So did that mean that Lewis lost a bit of money as well?
I would think so. I would think that would be one of the things that would have hurt Lewis. I don't think that it would have been the main reason. The main reason was that he just didn't care anymore. He was racked with arthritis, etc., etc. He had an operation on his foot. There was nothing left for him. There was no one left, so to speak. And the money would have been a fair part of it, because I'm sure that Graham had more business sense, let's say, than Lewis. Lewis could probably open a bank account, but I think Graham could probably open a bank account somewhere else, so to speak. And I think that had a fair bit to do with it.
In the end, during the day, he was reduced to sitting there watching the television, watching the races and cooking shows on TV. On March 31, 2004, at 6:40 p.m, 2 gunmen burst in. Lewis said to Bertie, "We're off here." Here's a character in Underbelly describing what happened.
There were 2 gunmen wearing balaclavas. They ran straight up to him.
Did these men say anything?
Lewis did, though.
And what did he say?
He said, "I think we're off here."
So because of arthritis, Lewis couldn't carry a gun anymore?
No, he couldn't. And the arthritis and the police, both the drug squad and Piranha, were both fairly down on us, more so the drug squad, because if we were pinched with a gun being on bail, we would have gone straight back on remand. In any case, that night at the Brunswick Club, I don't think a gun would have helped us. It was too quick, and far too quick. It happened in an instant. If we were both armed, if we had one on the counter behind the statue, wouldn't have made any difference. None at all. That wouldn't have helped. They wouldn't have helped us at all, being armed that night.
When did you first see them?
I'd turned around to pick up the change off the bar we were going, and I said, "Let's get out of here, Lewis." I had a bad feeling that night, and I said, "Let's get out of here, Lewis." And Lewis had just taken the phone call, and he never got a chance to tell me who it was from. I've got my ideas.
Is that it's 2 men, 1 dead, 1 shot. That the dead man, I am told from my sources, unconfirmed at this stage, is that it is Jason Moran's father, Lewis Moran, has been shot dead.
I turned around. Next thing I hear was boom, boom, boom on the type of lino type, whatever type floor it was. To me, it sounded like hobnail boots, and this bloke burst through, elbowed me aside, and there was an old boxer there. Elbowed him aside, put a shotty into Lewis's groin and pushed him towards the passageway, going to the toilets actually. And whilst he did that, while he had the shotty in him, he turned around and smiled at me, and you could see underneath his balaclava, gave me a good look. And as I said, it wouldn't have mattered at all if we had a machine gun on us. The blokes around us were social drinkers. They weren't They weren't lads or anything like that. They were just nice blokes. So, that's how it was there.
And Lewis tried to run? No.
Lewis never ran. Lewis couldn't do anything. He was just pushed backwards with the shotty in his groin. Well, then he was out of my view. And I suppose I was in a state of bloody panic, to be quite honest. So, for some stupid reason, I ran up behind them. Couldn't see them. Thought they must be in the toilet. He's taking him in there to knock him. So, unarmed as I was, I went into the toilet. Not there. And all the time you're sort of thinking, what am I going to do here? And do I hide in the toilet store? Do I go out? And I said, oh, bugger it. So I went out and I've gone around behind the poker machines, and he'd obviously took Lewis in near the actual cashier's desk. I think it was. There's a bank of poker machines. And I think it was also quick. I think I heard a shot then, but then I ran towards the front door, and as I'm going towards the front door, I see this other bloke pointing the shooter at me. I said, this is nice. So I pretended I had one. I kept putting my hand in the back of my coat, pulling the back of my coat up, ran towards him, got a couple of foot from him, spun around and tried to kick him because he was going to hit me right in the head, and spun around, tried to kick him, and jumped. So hopefully if he got me, he gets me in the chest or something. Well, as it turned out, that saved my life. But getting back to be able to, even if I'd had a gun, I wouldn't have probably got the bloody thing out at any rate. It was all that fun. I had a suit on, and I was hoping he'd turn around and go out the door.
The assassination took out one of the city's key crime figures, Lewis Moran. His grieving widow saw shocking court videos of his attempts to flee one of his favourite haunts, the Brunswick Club. But former Olympic squad boxer Evangelos Goussis fired 2 close-range shots to the head of Moran, cowered in the corner, while Noel Foray shot and injured Moran's friend Bertie Wrout.
And how many times were you shot?
I was only shot them once, John, but what happened, he shot me with a 9mm Hydra shot, and he had an X carved into it, which I hear later on from his boasting at his hotel in North Geelong or wherever it was. And I span around, went through my arm here, and took about, I think, 2 centimetres. What's 2 centimetres in the old, whatever.
Half an inch, nearly an inch.
Nearly an inch. I had a cage on. We'll get back to what happened to the bullet. I had a cage on for 8 months that actually while the arm was knitting together. I nearly lost the arm. Anyway, it went through the arm, it hit me in the arm here, broke in 2 by hitting the bone, 2 exit holes here, and both halves of the bullets went into 2 entry holes into my chest. One of them dissipated, I suppose, broke into small particles. The other half of the bullet, which is still lodged in my spine, it crisscross, went through my liver, went through my diaphragm, nicked my kidney, intestine, lungs. They ended up having to cut the nose of the lungs off or something, but, and went through my spleen, which I had to get my spleen removed.
Were you conscious?
I was conscious, John. I was. It hit me, and it was like a train hitting me, and you must go into some sort of shock. The next thing I could hear, him barking at me. I thought he's barking at me like a dog. I find out later, 6 months, 3 months later, whatever, after reading newspaper reports, etc., etc., he let go another 4, which only the first one was the Hydra shot. I was conscious. I was sort of wandering around, and I'm wondering why my arms sort of going this way and that way, and it's swinging like a bloody pendulum. So I sort of There's a little ramp there near the front door of the Brunswick Club that goes up into the poker machines. And I sort of got up there. By this time, I'd started to think a little bit, and I thought, oh, this bastard will finish me, because I knew I was going to go down. So I went down and probably more helped myself go down, and so that I was lying on my left side. I was lying on my back end, and I put my hand over my head. I thought, this bastard's going to come along and finish me off, which is what you normally expect anyway. And I noticed someone showed me a news story at the time. Some witness said, yeah, there was an old bloke lying on the ground with his hand over his face. Well, I was terrified the bastard would come up and I could see him. But yes, I was. And the next thing that I remember is the ambulance blokes, or someone running in and say, Christ, here's another one. And I remember I said to them, they must have had me on the stretcher by then, and I said to them, my mate, is he off? And they said, yeah, he's dead. He's dead before he hit the ground. And next thing, I was in the ambulance. It's all pretty much of a blur, lights and colour and all this sort of thing. And one of the ambulance blokes said to me, are you in pain? I said, it's starting to hurt now. Just put me to bloody sleep, will you? And really, at the time, I'd really only thought I'd been shot in the arm. And I didn't realise that the two halves had gone into the body.
Well, they nearly killed you.
Well, I was on life support for 3 days. I died that night in hospital. Possibly, I suppose, I probably died in the ambulance for all I know. But I did die. They told me that I did die in hospital that night. And for 3 days, they had me on life support, and the people that came in to see me, my brother, sister, etc., said you were like a frog splayed out, and your head was as big as a basketball through the morphine, I presume. And they had to give me something like 38 units of blood. They couldn't stop the bleeding, so they ended up removing the spleen, which to this day I've got to take antibiotics and all that sort of thing. The immune system's a bit buggered. And I think after 3 days, that was then they had to operate on the artery near the kidney, and that was probably about 3 or 4 days later. And anyway, I think I was in intensive care for probably, I'm not sure, 6 weeks, I think, and then to a ward. I'm not too sure. Yes. But I think, from memory again, I may have died once again, maybe the second night or the second day or something.
You said it was like a frog being dissected.
That's how they told me I looked. I was open, all my internal organs were there. As I said, my head was like a basketball. Actually, later on, one of my particular mates, he was there all that night. I think he stayed the next day and all that sort of thing. And when I finally got home from hospital, I wouldn't shave in hospital. And he came over to shave me, and I said to him, now you're all telling me about this, my head was like a basketball. I said, why didn't you shave me then when my skin was all torn?
Lewis was shot dead and Bertie was severely wounded. 3 men were arrested, 2 hitmen and a driver. Career criminal Noel Foray pleaded guilty, and in December 2016 died in jail. The driver and crew head pleaded guilty and is a broken man. Kickboxer Ange Goosis was found guilty and maintains his innocence.
Goosis claimed a letter found after the trial implicated a third party and cleared him. But the judges...
Much later, Carl Williams would plead guilty to organising the murder, and in 2010 was bashed to death in Bowen Prison.
To my dying day, I can remember my thoughts as I was in position myself to go down and be executed. I proposed the hand over the face. I can remember to my dying day, I said, Lewis, you bastard, you've got us killed for a cheap beer.
The Moran clan proves the cliche that if you live by the sword, you die by it. In June 2009, Lewis's brother Des was shot dead outside an Ascot Vale cafe. Tuppence was considered to be the best of the Morans, but admittedly it was a pretty low bar. The hit was ordered by Lewis's widow, the insufferable Judy Moran, who wanted to inherit the estate. She now spends her time in prison eating cake and trying to run over the toes of her perceived enemies in her disability scooter. Knowing them for most of their lives, Bertie reflected on the fate of the Moran sons.
Were they ever going to be anything other than criminals?
That's a girly question, that one. From a young age, I don't think they had any other choice than to go the way they went. It was Lewis pushing them, their upbringing, their background, the entire family thing. I don't think they had any choice. They were always going to be like that. And they were probably always going to come to an end. They were always going to end up like what happened was, it was inevitable. It was inevitable.
Bertie died, partially from his wounds, in June 2015, aged 73. His hatred of Lewis had grown over the years and he was dead broke. You know what? Sometimes crime just doesn't pay.
But people tend to look at people who've been shot and say, oh, you've recovered. Do you ever recover from it?
You recover from the mental thing, John, but it's the actual physical thing. It's obviously shortened my life. I'm prone to chest infections with the diaphragm and the lung and probably the spleen. I've got to, as I think I said, I've got to take antibiotics the rest of my life. I've got to take a stomach pill the rest of my life because of all the internal damage. That you never recover from. But I still have the occasional nightmare and things like that, and there's a couple of things that stand out. But and you get paranoid and all this sort of thing. I've been diagnosed with one of the worst cases of post-traumatic stress disorder a psychologist has ever seen. And so I suppose even the mental thing, there's still a lot there. Depression, all that sort of thing. But you've got to stand up and just get on with life because no one else is going to help you.
This episode was produced and edited by Machine Gun Margaret Gordon. Mixed by Cool Hand Cormac Lally. The audio from Bertie Wrout's interview is courtesy of Terry Carline from the documentary we did together called Dead Famous. Archive audio from 9 News and Underbelly. Tom McKendrick is head of audio. I'm John Sylvester. Thanks for listening.